The light in New Avalon never really reaches the bottom levels. That's where I lived, in the semi-darkness that had become humanity's refuge after the solar energy pandemic. I liked it that way. The shadows felt comfortable, like an old jacket that's worn in all the right places. My name is Scott, and I was nobody special. Just a security technician who kept to himself, fixed people's security systems, and didn't ask questions. At least that's what I thought. It started with a dating app message at midnight. Not the usual time I checked my notifications, but insomnia had become an old friend after leaving military service. The profile said Pamela, with a photo that showed just enough to be intriguing. Pale skin, dark hair, and eyes that seemed to hold centuries. I only meet after sunset. Her message read, non-negotiable. I laughed, assuming it was a vampire joke. People had gotten weird since moving underground, developing all sorts of affectations to cope with our semi-subterranean existence. The solar flares had forced humanity to adapt, to build downward instead of upward, to live in a world where UV protection wasn't just recommended, it was survival. I typed back, as long as you don't bite on the first date. Her reply came instantly, no promises. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. But loneliness makes fools of us all. The bar she chose was called the Crimson Moon, tucked away in a corner of the semi-autonomous underground city of New Avalon, where even the darkness seemed darker. No windows, minimal lighting, and a clientele that spoke in hushed tones. I arrived early, an old habit from my military days that I couldn't shake. The bartender, a massive man with unusually sharp canines, didn't smile when I ordered a whiskey. "You waiting for someone?" he asked, his voice like gravel. "Yeah, blind date," I replied, taking a slow sip. He nodded knowingly. "Name?" "Scott." "No," he said with a hint of impatience. "Her name?"
"Oh, Pamela?"
The bartender's eyes widened slightly. He placed a coaster under my drink with unusual care. "On the house," he muttered, before moving to the other end of the bar. Odd. But New Avalon was full of odd. The city was a patchwork of humanity, and others, mutants, half-breeds, and rumors of actual vampires living in secret enclaves. Most people considered the vampire stories urban legends, a way to explain the pale figures who only emerged at night. Official reports blamed radiation sensitivity from the solar flares. I never gave it much thought either way. Pamela arrived exactly at midnight, wearing a burgundy dress that seemed to flow like liquid as she moved. Her skin was alabaster, her lips the color of wine, and her eyes. Her eyes were ancient in a face that couldn't be older than 30. "You must be Scott," she said, her voice surprisingly warm for someone who looked so cold. I stood, military training kicking in. "And you're Pamela." She smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "Shall we sit somewhere more private?" The booth she chose was in the darkest corner of the already dark establishment. No mirrors behind the bar. I noticed for the first time, interesting design choice. "So," I said, "what do you do when you're not meeting strangers in dimly lit bars?" "I'm a collector," she replied, not touching her red drink. "Rare artifacts, mostly. Items with history. Anything I might have heard of?" Her smile deepened. "I doubt it. My collection is quite specialized." She leaned forward. "And you? What does Scott, the security technician, do when he's not being stood up by lesser women?" I raised an eyebrow. "How did you know I work in security?" "You have the look," she said smoothly. "Observant, cautious. You've checked all exits twice since sitting down. Military background, I'm guessing?" "Former," I admitted. "Nothing exciting, just technical support." "Liar," she said, but with a playful tone. "There's blood under your fingernails." I glanced down reflexively. My nails were clean. Pamela laughed, a sound like silver bells. Figuratively speaking, of course. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that. She was well-read, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in my mundane stories about security system malfunctions and paranoid clients. 3 hours passed like minutes. I found myself drawn to her in a way that felt both dangerous and inevitable. As we left the bar, the night air, filtered and recycled through New Avalon's massive environmental systems, felt electric between us. "I'd invite you back to my place," she said, "but I have a strict no first-date visitors policy." "Reasonable," I replied, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and relief. There was something about Pamela that set off warning bells in the back of my mind, the same bells that had kept me alive during my military service. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. "Perhaps next time." Her touch was cold, but it sent heat racing through my veins. Then she was gone, melting into the shadows of the underground city with unnatural grace. I stood there for a moment, collecting myself, before heading toward the transport tube that would take me back to my sector. The streets were nearly empty at this hour, with just the occasional night worker or insomniac wandering past the shuttered storefronts. The attack came from nowhere. 3 figures in black tactical gear emerged from a service alley. Military-grade cloaking tech, the kind that wasn't supposed to be available to civilians. I recognized the tech before I recognized the danger. Professional hazard. "Subject located," one of them said into a comm unit. Their accent was strange, with consonants that clicked in places they shouldn't. I turned to run, but 2 more appeared behind me. 5 attackers, all armed with what looked like pulse rifles, another piece of tech that shouldn't exist outside military compounds. "This is a mistake," I said, raising my hands. "I'm nobody." "Correct assessment," replied the leader. "You are nobody. You will be nothing. Authorization, terminate." They raised their weapons in perfect unison. I braced for impact, my mind racing through escape scenarios and finding none. The first attacker's head separated from his body before he could pull the trigger. It happened so fast I couldn't process it. A blur of motion, the sound of tearing flesh. And suddenly, Pamela was standing in the middle of the group, her elegant dress now splattered with something dark that wasn't quite blood. The remaining attackers turned their weapons toward her, but they were too slow. Pamela moved like water, like shadow, like nothing human. 2 more fell in sprays of that same dark fluid. The 4th managed to fire his weapon, but the energy pulse passed through empty air as Pamela seemed to dissolve and reappear behind him. The last attacker turned to run. Pamela was on him in an instant, her hand plunging into his back and emerging with something that pulsed with biomechanical light. 5 attackers, 5 seconds, 5 corpses. Pamela turned to me, her eyes now glowing with an inner crimson light, her delicate fingers clutching what appeared to be a synthetic heart. "Well," she said, her voice unchanged despite the carnage surrounding her. "I suppose the cat's out of the bag. You're—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "A vampire?" She dropped the synthetic organ, which continued to pulse on the ground. "Yes, and you, Scott, are in significantly more trouble than you realize." She glanced at the bodies, which were already beginning to decompose at an accelerated rate. "These aren't human. They're combat drones. Synthetic flesh over mechanical frames." I stared at the disintegrating remains. "Who sent them?" "That's what we need to find out." She wiped her hands on a handkerchief that appeared from nowhere. "And by we, I mean you're coming with me, now." "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said, finding my voice at last. "You just killed 5, whatever they were." "And they were about to kill you," she countered. "Look, we can discuss my dietary preferences and ethical stance on synthetic homicide later. Right now, we need to get somewhere safe before their control system registers the loss and sends reinforcements." As if on cue, a distant alarm began to sound. Pamela grabbed my arm, her strength making resistance futile. "Your place or mine?" she asked with inappropriate cheerfulness. I live in a security building, I said automatically. Biometric locks, titanium reinforced doors. Charming, but inadequate. She cut me off. My place it is. Her place turned out to be in the deepest level of New Avalon, beyond even the regulated zones. We traveled through service tunnels and abandoned corridors. Pamela, leading with unerring confidence despite the pitch darkness. "How can you see?" I asked, as we descended yet another maintenance shaft. "I'm a vampire, Scott," she replied with a hint of amusement. "Night vision comes with the territory." After what felt like hours of walking, climbing, and occasionally crawling through spaces that shouldn't have existed on any city plan, we arrived at a massive steel door embedded in the ancient bedrock. Pamela placed her palm against it, and the metal flowed like mercury, creating an opening. "Welcome to my humble abode," she said, gesturing me inside. Humble was not the word I would have chosen. The space beyond the door was vast, a cathedral-like chamber carved from the living rock, illuminated by soft blue bioluminescent panels. The architecture was a stunning blend of Gothic splendor and modern minimalism, with soaring arches supporting a ceiling lost in shadow. And in the center of it all, elevated on a marble platform, sat a coffin. Not just any coffin. This was a masterpiece of engineering and art. Constructed from what appeared to be black crystal and platinum, it hummed with integrated technology. Data streams flowed across its surface in elegant patterns, and a soft glow emanated from within. "You actually sleep in a coffin," I said, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. Pamela shrugged elegantly. "It's temperature-controlled, has integrated entertainment systems, and keeps out the light. Plus," she added with a wink, "it freaks out other vampires. They think I'm trying too hard." "Other vampires," I repeated dumbly. "There are other vampires." "Of course there are," she said, moving to what appeared to be a kitchen area. She opened a refrigerator that contained nothing but rows of blood bags and bottles of dark liquid. "Did you think I was unique?" "Actually, don't answer that. Male ego and all." She tossed me a bottle of water, actual, purified water, not the recycled stuff most New Avalon residents survived on, and poured herself a glass of something thick and red. "AB positive," she said, noticing my stare. "Synthetic, if that makes you feel better, though nothing beats the real thing." I uncapped the water with shaking hands. "Why were those things trying to kill me? And why did you save me?" Pamela sipped her drink delicately. "Two excellent questions. Unfortunately, I only have a partial answer to the first and a complicated answer to the second." She gestured to a seating area with furniture that looked medieval, but was clearly modern in construction. "Please, make yourself comfortable. This might take a while." I sat on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than my annual salary. "I'm listening." "Those weren't just any combat drones," she began, settling into a throne-like chair opposite me. "They belong to an organization called Blackthorn, a council of vampire cyborg hybrids who believe the future lies in biological technology rather than pure bloodlines." "Vampire cyborgs," I repeated. "You're joking." "I wish I were. Think of them as the radical transhumanist faction of vampire society. They believe in upgrading through technology, rather than preserving our biological purity." She made a face. "Ghastly creatures. More machine than vampire at this point." "And they want me dead because—" "That's the question, isn't it?" Pamela set down her glass. "You're not on any vampire registry. You're not affiliated with any known hunter organizations. You're not even particularly special, as far as humans go." She paused. "No offense." "None taken," I muttered. "And yet," she continued, "they sent a kill squad after you. High-end models, too, not the cannon fodder they usually deploy." She leaned forward. "So, Scott the security technician with the military background, that was nothing exciting. What aren't you telling me?" Nothing, I protested. I fix security systems. I keep to myself. I watch old movies on my days off. I'm the definition of unremarkable. Then, why did I find your profile flagged in a secure Blackthorn database while I was doing some, let's call it, unauthorized browsing? I stared at her. You found me in a vampire cyborg database and decided the appropriate response was to ask me on a date? A smile played at the corners of her mouth. I was curious. It's not often a seemingly ordinary human catches Blackthorn's attention. I wanted to see what made you special before they found you. Her expression darkened. I didn't expect them to move so quickly. So this wasn't actually a date, I said, feeling an irrational pang of disappointment. It was reconnaissance. It was both, she replied, her eyes meeting mine with unexpected intensity. I don't mix business with pleasure as a rule, but I've been known to make exceptions. She stood abruptly. But that's not important now. What matters is keeping you alive while I figure out why Blackthorn wants you dead. And how do you propose we do that? Simple, she said, gesturing around the massive chamber. You'll stay here, where it's safe. I stood as well. I'm not staying in a vampire's lair. Would you prefer to go back to your security building and wait for the next wave of assassin drones? She asked coolly. Because I assure you, there will be a next wave. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right and we both knew it. Fine, I conceded. I'll stay, temporarily. Excellent, Pamela said, her smile returning. There's a guest room through that archway. The bathroom has actual water pressure, which I find humans appreciate. The kitchen is stocked with food. Yes, actual food. I do entertain occasionally, and the entire place is shielded against any known scanning technology. How long do you think this will take? I asked. To unravel why one of the most powerful vampire organizations in the world wants a seemingly ordinary human dead? She shrugged. A few days. Maybe a week. A week, I exclaimed. I have jobs scheduled, clients expecting me. All easily handled with a message about a family emergency, she interrupted. Unless you'd prefer I explain that you're hiding from vampire cyborgs in an actual vampire's coffin chamber? I sighed in defeat. Fine. A few days. Pamela's smile was triumphant. Perfect. Now, I need to run some searches, make some calls, and possibly threaten a few informants. Feel free to explore. Just don't touch anything that looks valuable, ancient, or like it might contain trapped souls. Is that last one a joke? I asked. She winked. Mostly. As Pamela busied herself at what appeared to be a command center disguised as an antique writing desk. I took stock of my situation. I was trapped in an underground lair with a vampire who had just efficiently slaughtered 5 synthetic assassins, hiding from a council of vampire cyborgs who wanted me dead for reasons unknown. And somehow, this wasn't even the strangest date I'd been on in New Avalon. The first night in Pamela's lair was surreal. I couldn't sleep, despite the guest bed being more comfortable than anything I'd ever experienced. Every sound, the distant hum of machinery, the occasional ping from Pamela's computer system, the whisper of air through hidden vents, kept me alert and on edge. Around what my watch claimed was 3 a.m. I gave up and wandered back into the main chamber. Pamela was still at her workstation, her fingers dancing over holographic interfaces. Insomnia? She asked without looking up. Something like that, I replied, approaching cautiously. Find anything? Nothing concrete, she said, frustration evident in her voice. Blackthorn has gone into security lockdown. All their systems are offline. They're using couriers and in-person meetings only. Smart, I admitted. Can't hack what isn't connected. She glanced at me. Indeed. A security expert would know that. It's basic protocol for any high-level breach, I said with a shrug. Shut down, isolate, verify, then reconnect. Pamela tilted her head, studying me with renewed interest. That's military procedure, not civilian. I shifted uncomfortably. I picked things up here and there. She clearly didn't believe me, but didn't press further. Are you hungry? There's food in the kitchen. The kitchen, like everything else in Pamela's home, was both ancient and modern. Stone countertops and copper pots hung alongside molecular gastronomy equipment. The refrigerator was divided into two sections, one labeled food and the other, ominously, not food. I opted to explore only the former. So, I said, making a sandwich from artisanal bread and meats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. How does one become a vampire in the post-solar flare world? I always thought it was just a myth. Radiation sensitivity and all that. Pamela appeared in the doorway, moving with that unnerving silence. We've always been here, she said. Long before your solar catastrophe. The flares just created an environment more conducive to our public integration. Public meaning what, exactly? Because most people still think vampires are urban legends. As we prefer it, she replied. Official recognition would mean official regulation. We maintain the fiction of radiation sensitivity because it's convenient for both sides. Humans get to feel they understand the world, and we get to exist within it without constant persecution. How many of you are there? I asked, taking a bite of my sandwich. In New Avalon? Perhaps 200 Truebloods. Worldwide? A few thousand. She smiled at my expression. Did you expect more? Honestly, I didn't expect any, I admitted. So what's with the Blackthorn group? Vampire cyborgs sound like something from a bad sci-fi movie. Pamela's expression darkened. They're a perversion. Vampires who've embraced extreme biotech modification, replacing blood with synthetic fluids, augmenting themselves with mechanical components, uploading partial consciousness into digital networks. Sounds efficient, I observed. It's sacrilege, she snapped. Then caught herself. Forgive me. It's a sensitive topic among traditional vampires. Blackthorn represents everything we stand against. The mechanization of life. The sterile future they envision where biological purity is sacrificed for technological advancement. And where do humans fit into their vision? Her eyes met mine, serious now. They don't. In Blackthorn's perfect world, humans would be harvested for compatible biological material, then discarded. Pure vampires would be upgraded or eliminated. It would be a world of hybrids, programmed for optimal performance rather than living with free will. I set down my sandwich, appetite gone. And you disagree with this vision, I take it? Vehemently, she said. Which is why I liberated certain information from their databases. Why I've been tracking their operations. Why I intervened tonight. You're a rebel vampire, I said, unable to keep a note of amusement from my voice. She smiled, revealing just the tips of her fangs. I prefer freedom fighter, but yes, I oppose Blackthorn and everything they stand for. And the other vampires, what do they think? Most keep their heads down, unwilling to challenge Blackthorn's growing power. Some actively support them, seeing it as the inevitable future. She shrugged. Politics exists in every society. Scott, vampires are no different. I finished my sandwich in thoughtful silence. So, where does that leave us? You're hiding me from vampire cyborgs while trying to figure out why they want me dead. All as part of your one vampire resistance movement? That sums it up nicely, she agreed. Though I do have allies. Not many. But enough to maintain an intelligence network. And what happens when you figure it out? When you know why they're after me? Pamela's expression became unreadable. That depends entirely on what we discover. The next several days fell into an unexpected routine. During the daylight hours, according to my watch, as there was no natural light in Pamela's lair, she retreated to her high-tech coffin to rest. I spent that time exploring her vast home, careful to respect her warnings about touching anything that looked dangerous or valuable. The place was a museum of history, mixed with cutting-edge technology. Ancient weapons hung on walls next to holographic art installations. Books, actual paper books, filled shelves alongside data crystals and neural recording devices. At night, we would work together on the Blackthorn problem. Pamela would make calls to mysterious contacts, speak in languages I didn't recognize, and occasionally leave for hours at a time to meet informants. I offered what technical expertise I could, helping her strengthen her already impressive security systems and analyze the fragments of data she'd stolen from Blackthorn. On the fourth night, I found myself watching Pamela as she played chess against her computer system. She moved with calculated precision, her face a mask of concentration. There was something hypnotic about her movements, something ancient and predatory that both frightened and fascinated me. "You're staring," she said without looking up from the board. "Sorry," I replied. "Not entirely sorry. I've just never seen anyone play chess against an AI at that difficulty level before." 500 years of practice," she said with a small smile. "You pick up a few tricks." 500, I started, then shook my head. "You know, a week ago I would have called bullshit on that." And now, she captured the AI's queen with a move I hadn't even seen developing. Now I'm living in a vampire's lair, hiding from cyborg assassins. My threshold for bullshit has significantly increased. Pamela laughed, a sound I'd grown to appreciate. "A practical approach." She gestured to the board. "Would you like to play? The AI is becoming predictable." I sat across from her as she reset the pieces. "I should warn you. I was the security division champion 3 years running." "How terrifying," she deadpanned. "I'll try to contain my fear." She beat me in 12 moves. "Again," I said, resetting the board. "I wasn't ready." She beat me in 14 moves that time. By our 5th game, I managed to last nearly 30 minutes before she trapped my king in an elegant series of moves I never saw coming. "You're getting better," she said, genuine approval in her voice. "Or you're getting worse," I countered. She smiled. "I never perform below my capabilities. Scott, not in chess, not in combat, not in other areas." The look she gave me sent heat racing through my body. Over the past few days, something had been building between us, a tension that wasn't entirely due to our bizarre circumstances. I found myself watching her when she wasn't looking, admiring the grace of her movements, the sharpness of her mind, even the cold beauty of her predatory nature. "Pamela," I began, not entirely sure what I wanted to say. She held up a hand, her expression suddenly alert. "Someone's breached the outer perimeter." I tensed. "Blackthorn." "Unknown," she said, moving to her security console. "But they've bypassed the first 3 layers of security without triggering alarms. That suggests resources and knowledge." "What's the protocol?" I asked. "Military training kicking in?" She glanced at me, seemed to make a decision. "East corridor, 3rd panel from the door. There's a weapons cache." I nodded and moved quickly to the location she'd indicated. The panel slid open at my touch, revealing an arsenal that would make most military units jealous. I selected a compact pulse rifle and a sidearm that looked vaguely familiar. "This is military-grade hardware," I said when I returned. "Where did you get it?" "I'm 500 years old. Scott, you accumulate things." She was arming herself as well, though her choices were more traditional, a pair of curved blades that seemed to drink in the light. "These are my preference, but I'm proficient with most weapons." "Of course you are," I muttered. Pamela's security screens showed shadowy figures moving through the outer tunnels. 8 intruders, she reported. Humanoid but moving with synthetic precision. Blackthorn drones. Upgraded models. "Can we hold them off?" "We can do better than that," she said, a predatory smile spreading across her face. We can capture one and extract information. That's your plan? Take one alive while killing the other 7? Do you have a better suggestion? She asked. I studied the security feeds, noting the formation and movement patterns. Actually, yes. See how they're moving? Standard sweep and clear pattern. But they're cycling their point positions. If we time it right, we can isolate the rear guard during a formation change. Pamela looked at me with new respect. Not just a security technician after all, are you? I ignored the comment. Here's what we do. 20 minutes later, we had our prisoner. A blackthorn drone that looked human, but moved with subtle wrongness. Its skin was pale like Pamela's, but with a silicon undertone that caught the light differently. Its eyes were black orbs without pupils, and where a human or vampire would have veins, faint blue circuits pulsed beneath its artificial skin. The other 7 drones lay destroyed in the outer corridors, taken down with surgical precision using the plan I'd devised. Pamela had bound the captured drone to a chair in what appeared to be a dedicated interrogation room. The creature wasn't struggling against its restraints. It simply sat, its black eyes tracking our movements. It's in standby mode, Pamela explained. Limited autonomy until it receives new orders or is directly engaged. Can you hack it? I asked. Access its memory cores? Perhaps, she said, studying the drone. But there's a faster way. Without warning, she plunged one of her blades into the drone's chest, precisely where a human heart would be. The drone jerked, its eyes flaring with blue light. Emergency protocols engaged, it said in a voice that was almost human, but not quite. System compromise detected, initiating memory purge. Override code Theta 97 Echo 3, Pamela said quickly. The drone froze. Then, its posture changed subtly. Override accepted, awaiting instructions. I stared at Pamela. You have override codes for Blackthorn drones? I told you I have allies, she replied. Now, let's see what our friend knows. She turned to the drone. Identify primary mission parameters. Primary mission. Locate and terminate Subject Echo 9, the drone responded. Secondary mission. Eliminate all witnesses. Tertiary mission. Recover biological samples from subject for verification. Who or what is Subject Echo 9? Pamela demanded. The drone's head turned toward me with mechanical precision. Subject Echo 9 located. Identity confirmed. A chill ran down my spine. That's impossible, I said. I'm Scott Harmon, security technician. I'm not this... Echo whatever. Identify the nature and origin of Subject Echo 9, Pamela continued, ignoring my protest. Subject Echo 9. Hybrid biological weapon. Human vampire DNA synthesis. Project Lazarus test. Subject. Status. Escaped containment. Threat level. Maximum. Authorization for termination. Confirmed. The room seemed to spin around me. This is insane, I said. I'm human. I bleed. I eat food. I walk in daylight. I'm not some hybrid weapon. Pamela's expression was unreadable. Continue, she told the drone. Provide details on Project Lazarus and Subject Echo 9's creation. Project Lazarus. Blackthorn initiative to create controllable hybrid soldiers, combining vampire abilities with human adaptability. Echo series designed as infiltration units, with suppressed vampire traits and implanted human memories. Echo 9 is the first successful prototype to achieve complete human integration without awareness of true nature. That's impossible, I repeated, but with less conviction. My head had begun to pound. Memories flickering at the edges of my consciousness. Memories of sterile rooms, of pain, of voices discussing me as if I were an object. When was Echo 9 created? Pamela asked, her voice gentle now. Initial synthesis, 7 years ago. Memory implantation and conditioning, 5 years ago. Controlled release into human society for observation, 3 years ago. 3 years. The exact amount of time since my discharge from military service. The exact amount of time I'd been living in New Avalon, working as a security specialist with skills I couldn't fully explain.
This can't be real,
I whispered. Pamela turned to me, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't identify. Scott! She never finished her sentence. The drone suddenly convulsed, blue light pouring from its eyes and mouth. Remote override detected, it announced, initiating self-destruct sequence.
Get down!
Pamela shouted, tackling me to the floor as the drone exploded in a shower of synthetic flesh and mechanical components. We lay there for a moment, Pamela's body shielding mine despite her smaller frame. Her weight was substantial, more than her slender form suggested. Vampire density. I realized absently, my mind still reeling from the drone's revelations. "Are you hurt?" she asked, rolling off me and scanning the room for threats. Physically, no. I sat up slowly. Mentally, I'm having an existential crisis. Pamela helped me to my feet. We need to move. That self-destruct was remotely triggered, which means Blackthorn knows exactly where we are. Did you know? I asked, the question burning in my throat. When you found me in their database, did you know what I was? She met my gaze steadily. I suspected you were something more than you appeared. But no, I didn't know the specifics. Why should I believe you? I demanded. For all I know, you're working with them. This could all be an elaborate test of my whatever I am. If I were working with Blackthorn, you'd already be in a lab being dissected, she said bluntly. And if I wanted you dead, you would be. I've had ample opportunity. She had a point. So what now? We run? Now, she said, moving to her command console. We access my secure files. Because if you're what that drone claims you are, I have information you need to see. Her fingers flew over the interface, bypassing security protocols and unlocking encrypted files. 3 years ago, I hacked into a Blackthorn facility after hearing rumors of a new bioweapon project. What I found was fragmentary. Security was too tight for a complete extraction, but I got enough to know they were doing something unprecedented. A holographic display flared to life, showing scientific diagrams and technical specifications I couldn't begin to understand. But the central image was unmistakable. A human figure with vampire DNA markers highlighted throughout its system. Project Lazarus, I read, the name sending another jolt of half-remembered pain through my skull. They were creating me? Not just you, Pamela said grimly. An army. But you were the prototype, the first successful integration. The others before you rejected the vampire DNA or lost their humanity in the process, becoming mindless killing machines. And I was different because, according to these files, your base human material had an unusual genetic marker, a natural mutation that allowed for vampire DNA integration without rejection. She looked up at me. You were 1 in a billion, Scott, a perfect hybrid candidate. I stared at the holographic image, trying to reconcile it with my sense of self. But I have memories, a childhood, military service. Implanted, she said gently. Constructed from various sources and integrated into your consciousness through neural programming. That's not possible, I insisted. My memories are too detailed, too real. The human brain fills in gaps, Pamela explained. They would have given you skeletal memories, key points, emotional anchors, and your mind naturally created connections between them, adding detail and nuance based on your core personality patterns. I felt sick. So nothing about me is real? I'm just a weapon, a thing? Pamela shut down the display and took my hands in hers. Her skin was cool, but not cold, closer to human temperature than I'd noticed before. Listen to me, Scott. What matters isn't how you began. It's who you choose to be now. Her eyes held mine, intense and sincere. I've lived 5 centuries. I've seen humans commit atrocities that would make demons weep, And I've seen monsters show more humanity than saints. The circumstances of your creation don't define you. I wanted to believe her, desperately, but the foundation of my identity had just been shattered, and I was still falling through the pieces. We need to leave, Pamela said, practical again. Blackthorn will send more drones, and next time they'll come prepared for both of us. Where would we go? I asked, feeling numb. I have a safe house in the outer sectors. It's not as comfortable as this place, but its security is even better. We can regroup there, figure out our next move. And then what? I asked. Run forever? I'm not even human, Pamela. I'm a walking bioweapon who didn't know what he was. How do I just continue after learning that? She smiled, an expression that somehow mixed sadness and hope. One step at a time, Scott, starting with getting out of here alive. We packed quickly. Weapons, data crystals, emergency supplies. Pamela had to destroy much of her collection, setting charges that would collapse the entire lair after our departure. She did it methodically, without sentiment, though I caught her pausing once over an ancient-looking book, which she ultimately slipped into her pack. 500 years of collecting, I observed as she set the final charge. That's a lot to leave behind. Objects can be replaced, she replied. Lives cannot. We escaped through a maintenance tunnel so narrow we had to crawl single file for nearly a kilometer. Pamela led the way, her night vision guiding us through the darkness. How far to your safe house? I asked, when we finally emerged into a wider service corridor. About 6 sectors, she replied. We'll need to use public transport for part of it. Less conspicuous than trying to avoid cameras entirely. Won't Blackthorn be monitoring the transport systems? Yes, but they'll be looking for 2 people traveling together and avoiding surveillance. So we'll do the opposite. Travel separately, in plain sight, and meet at the destination. It was a good plan, the kind that came from centuries of experience. We parted at the next junction, with plans to rendezvous in 3 hours. Scott, Pamela said before we separated, whatever happens, remember, you're more than what they made you to be. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and watched her disappear into the crowds of New Avalon's middle sectors. Traveling alone gave me too much time to think. Every memory now felt suspect. My childhood, my military service, even my preference for old movies. Had that been programmed into me? Was anything about me authentic? Or was I just an elaborate fiction created in a Blackthorn laboratory? I was so lost in these thoughts that I almost missed the tale. 2 figures, moving with the slightly too perfect precision that marked Blackthorn drones. They were good, switching positions, maintaining variable distances. But my military training, real or implanted, recognized the pattern. I needed to lose them without letting them know I'd spotted them. The crowded transport hub ahead offered possibilities. I boarded a pod headed in the wrong direction, waited until the doors were about to close, then slipped out at the last second. The drones couldn't follow without revealing themselves. Using a series of rapid transport changes and moving through crowded areas, I eventually reached the rendezvous point, an abandoned maintenance facility in a neglected sector. Pamela was already there, looking grim. We've got a problem, she said without preamble. Blackthorn has deployed hunter drones throughout the transit system. They've got your biometric signature now. They can track you by your specific DNA markers. How is that possible? I asked. There are millions of people in New Avalon. You're not exactly people, she reminded me. Your hybrid DNA is unique, a beacon to their sensors. So what do we do? We need to mask your signature somehow. She looked thoughtful. There's a black market geneticist in Sector 9 who might be able to help. Someone who owes me a favor. What kind of favor? I asked. Her smile was cryptic. Let's just say I helped him avoid becoming dinner for a particularly hungry vampire elder about a century ago. The geneticist turned out to be operating from what appeared to be an ordinary medical clinic. though the equipment inside was far from standard. The man himself was ancient, with cybernetic eyes and hands that moved with preternatural precision. "Pamela," he greeted her, his voice surprisingly young for his aged appearance. "Calling in your marker after all these years?" "Circumstances demanded it, Dorian," she replied. "We need a DNA mask immediately." Dorian's mechanical eyes swiveled to examine me. "Interesting specimen. Human baseline with modifications." He circled me slowly. "Vampire integration at the cellular level. Extraordinary work. Blackthorn." "Yes," Pamela confirmed. "Can you mask him?" "Temporarily, yes. Permanently? No. The integration is too complete. His DNA is fundamentally altered." Dorian retrieved an instrument that looked like a cross between a syringe and a small computer. "This will scramble his surface markers for about 12 hours. Enough to get wherever you're going, but no more." "It'll do," Pamela said. "Proceed." The injection burned like acid in my veins. I gritted my teeth against the pain, refusing to cry out. "Impressive pain tolerance," Dorian noted clinically. "Another Blackthorn enhancement, no doubt." "How long until it takes effect?" I managed to ask. "It's working already," he replied. "But I'd advise staying off main transit lines for at least an hour, while your system fully adapts." We thanked him and left, taking a circuitous route through service tunnels and abandoned sectors. Pamela seemed to know every hidden path in New Avalon, navigating with the confidence of someone who had watched the city grow from its beginnings. "How long have you been in New Avalon?" I asked, as we crawled through a narrow ventilation shaft. "Since before it was called New Avalon," she replied. "I was here when they broke ground on the first underground shelters, after the solar flares made surface living untenable." "That was over 60 years ago." "A blink, from my perspective," she said. "I was in what you now call Europe for 3 centuries before that. The vampire community migrated gradually as human population centers shifted. Like parasites following their hosts," I observed. She shot me a look. "Symbiotes, if you want to be technical. Even before the Accords, most vampires understood the value of sustainable feeding practices." "Accords?" "The agreements between vampire elders and human governments after the solar crisis. We helped design the underground cities. We had some experience, you see, and in exchange, received official recognition and certain accommodations." "Like blood banks with your name on them?" "Among other considerations," she admitted. "It was a practical arrangement for both sides." We continued in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, we emerged into what had once been a storage facility, but now appeared abandoned. Pamela moved to a seemingly solid wall and pressed her palm against it. A hidden door slid open, revealing a sparse but well-equipped safe house. "Home sweet home," she said without enthusiasm. "For the next few days, at least." The safe house had none of the Gothic splendor of her previous lair. This was purely functional. Weapons racks, communications equipment, medical supplies, and minimal furnishings. The only concession to comfort was a reinforced sleeping chamber for Pamela, though it lacked the aesthetic touches of her crystal coffin. "What's our next move?" I asked as we secured the perimeter. Pamela activated the communication system. "We find out exactly what you are, and why Blackthorn is so desperate to reclaim you." "How? We lost most of your data in the escape." "I maintain backups," she said, inserting a crystal into the system. "And I have contacts who can fill in the gaps. But first, we need to address your condition." "My condition?" She turned to face me. "Scott, you're a human-vampire hybrid. Your vampire traits have been artificially suppressed, but they're still there, dormant in your DNA. The stress of the past few days, the combat situations, they're likely accelerating your development." I remembered the headaches, the flashes of memory, the way I'd instinctively known how to fight the drones. You're saying I'm activating? Essentially, yes. And we need to control that process before it controls you. The Echo series before you went insane, when their vampire traits emerged without proper guidance. And you know how to guide me through this? Her expression softened. I'm 500 years old. Scott, I've helped new vampires transition countless times. Your situation is unique, but the principles are similar. What do we need to do? First, you need to feed. I took a step back.
I'm not drinking blood.
You already need it, she said, matter-of-factly. Your body is changing, requiring nutrients that normal food can't provide. Haven't you noticed your increasing hunger over the past few days? The way nothing seems to satisfy it? She was right. I'd been ravenous, eating everything in sight at her lair, but never feeling full. It doesn't have to be human blood, she continued, opening a refrigerated compartment. Synthetic will suffice for now. She removed a packet of dark, red liquid. This is formulated specifically for vampire consumption. It contains all the necessary components without the ethical complications. I stared at the packet with equal parts revulsion and hunger. And if I refuse? Then your body will continue trying to activate your vampire traits without the necessary resources. Best case scenario, excruciating pain. Worst case, psychotic break as your enhanced abilities emerge without control. She held out the packet. Your choice. With trembling hands, I took the packet.
How do I?
Just drink it, she said gently. Your body will know what to do. The first taste was revolting, metallic and cold. But something in my altered physiology responded instantly. Suddenly, it wasn't disgusting. It was necessary, like water to a man dying of thirst. I drained the packet in seconds, immediately feeling energy surge through my system. Good, Pamela said, watching me carefully.
How do you feel?
Different, I admitted. Stronger, more aware. My senses seemed sharper. I could hear the faint electrical hum of the equipment, smell the synthetic blood on my breath, see details in the dimly lit room that should have been invisible. That's normal, she assured me. Your vampire traits are beginning to express themselves. We'll need to train you to control them. Train me how? The same way fledgling vampires have been trained for millennia, through discipline, focus, and practice. She smiled slightly. Though we'll have to adapt the traditional methods for your unique physiology. Over the next several days, while her contacts gathered information on Project Lazarus, Pamela taught me to manage my emerging abilities. My strength had increased dramatically, along with my speed and sensory acuity. I learned to modulate these enhancements, to blend in with humans when necessary. The most difficult aspect was the bloodthirst. Even with regular synthetic feedings, I found myself acutely aware of the pulse in Pamela's neck, the flow of blood beneath her pale skin. She noticed, of course. It gets easier, she told me after catching me staring for the third time that day. The hunger never completely disappears, but you learn to make it background noise, rather than a driving force. How did you learn? I asked. Who taught you? Something like pain flickered across her face. My maker was not kind. He believed suffering built character. She absently touched a scar on her neck, the only imperfection in her otherwise flawless skin. I learned control through necessity, not guidance. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. She shrugged. It was a different time. Compassion was seen as weakness, especially among vampires. Is that why you're helping me, compassion? Pamela considered the question. Initially, curiosity, then strategic interest. Anything that concerned Blackthorn concerned me. But now, she met my gaze directly. Now it's something else entirely. Before I could ask her to elaborate, the communication system chimed. Incoming transmission, Pamela said, moving to the console. Encrypted channel. The holographic display showed a face I didn't recognize. A woman with aristocratic features and eyes that glowed faintly red. Countess, Pamela greeted her with unexpected deference.
Pamela,
The woman replied, her accent ancient and unplaceable.
I have the information you requested on Project Lazarus. It's concerning.
I'm listening, Pamela said. Blackthorn wasn't just creating hybrid soldiers, the Countess said. They were creating replacements.
Replacements for what?
I asked, stepping into view. The Countess's eyes widened slightly. So this is Echo 9. Interesting. She studied me through the holographic interface. You appear more human than I expected.
Replacements for what?
I repeated. For vampires, she said simply. All vampires. Blackthorn's ultimate goal is to replace our species with controllable hybrids, beings with vampire abilities, but without vampire free will or culture.
Genocide,
Pamela whispered. Precisely, the Countess agreed. The Echo series was the prototype. Once perfected, they planned to unleash a biological agent that would destroy pure vampire cellular structure while leaving their hybrids unaffected. And humans? I asked. Collateral damage in some scenarios, preserved as a food source in others. The plans weren't finalized. The Countess's expression hardened. What matters is that you, Echo 9, are the linchpin. Your successful integration of vampire DNA without personality degradation was the breakthrough they needed. With you, they can perfect their replacement species. That's why they're hunting him so aggressively, Pamela realized. Without him, the project stalls. Indeed. And there's more. The command codes implanted in his neural structure. They're designed to activate remotely. Once captured, Echo 9 could be forced to comply with any directive, including releasing the biological agent. I felt sick again.
I'm a walking time bomb.
Not quite, the Countess said. The command codes require direct neural interface to activate. As long as you remain free, you remain autonomous. Can they be removed? Pamela asked. Theoretically, yes. Practically, the Countess shrugged elegantly. It would require equipment only Blackthorn possesses.
So we'd have to infiltrate Blackthorn headquarters,
Pamela said, as if discussing a mild inconvenience rather than a suicide mission.
If you wish to truly free him, yes.
The Countess looked at me again.
Though I question whether the risk is worth the reward. He is, after all, not one of us.
He's not one of them either, Pamela said sharply.
He deserves the right to choose his own path.
The Countess raised an eyebrow. You've grown attached. Interesting, she sighed. Very well. I'll send you the security protocols for Blackthorn's main facility. But understand this. If you fail, and Echo 9 falls into their hands, I will be forced to take extreme measures. Understood, Pamela said. After the transmission ended, I turned to Pamela. She's going to kill me if Blackthorn captures me, isn't she?
She'll try, Pamela replied. The Countess commands considerable resources.
And you'd oppose her? Risk everything for someone you barely know? Pamela was silent for a long moment. When I first found your profile in the Blackthorn database, I was simply curious. When I met you, I was intrigued. When I learned what you were, I was determined to keep you from Blackthorn for strategic reasons. She stepped closer. But now I see someone fighting the same battle I've fought for centuries, the right to define yourself, to choose your own path despite what others would make of you. I'm not just a cause to you, I asked, surprised by how much her answer mattered. No, Scott, she said softly. You're not just a cause. The moment stretched between us, charged with possibilities. Then the perimeter alarm blared, shattering the connection. Breach in Sector 3, Pamela announced, checking the security feed. Blackthorn found us. The feed showed at least 12 drones approaching through the abandoned storage facility, all heavily armed. Behind them came something else, a larger figure that moved with fluid grace despite its size. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the larger figure. Pamela's face went even paler than usual. "That's an Echo unit, one of your predecessors." The creature on the screen looked only vaguely human, its proportions wrong, its movements too quick and precise. Its skin was a patchwork of vampire pallor and mechanical components, with glowing red eyes that betrayed no hint of consciousness or emotion. "That thing is like me?" I asked in horror. "No," Pamela said firmly. "That's what happens when the integration fails, when the vampire instincts overwhelm the human consciousness. It's a weapon, nothing more." "And that's what Blackthorn wants to make more of? That's their replacement species?" "Controllable, programmable, without free will," she confirmed. "The perfect soldiers." The facility shook as something impacted the outer doors. "They're breaking through faster than expected," Pamela said. "We need to evacuate." "To where? If they found us here, they'll find us anywhere." She met my gaze, her expression resolute. "Then we stop running. We take the fight to them."
"You mean?"
"We infiltrate Blackthorn headquarters. Tonight. Before they can bolster their defenses or move their operations." She moved to the weapons rack, selecting her favored blades. "The Countess's intelligence gives us a window of opportunity. We can end this, Scott. We can free you from their control and stop their genocide plan in one strike."
"That's insane," I said. "We can't just two-person assault a heavily fortified compound."
"Three, actually," came a voice from the communications console. The Countess's face had reappeared. "I've been monitoring. Your situation is precarious."
"You're offering help?" Pamela asked, surprised.
"I'm offering a distraction," the Countess clarified. "My people will engage Blackthorn forces at their secondary facility. It should draw off a significant portion of their security."
"Why?" I asked. "Why help us?"
"Because while I may question your worth as an individual, Echo 9, I have no desire to see my species replaced by soulless automatons." She smiled thinly. "Self-interest is a powerful motivator." Another impact shook the facility. "The outer door won't hold much longer," Pamela warned. "Go," the Countess commanded. "There's an emergency exit in the eastern wall. It connects to the old water reclamation system. Follow it north for 2 kilometers. Then take the service ladder to level B5. My people will create their diversion in exactly 1 hour."
"Understood," Pamela said. "And thank you."
"Don't thank me yet," the Countess replied. "Survive first." We gathered what weapons and supplies we could carry, then rushed to the hidden exit. Behind us, the sound of the outer door giving way echoed through the facility. The water reclamation tunnel was narrow and filled with stagnant liquid that reached our knees. We moved as quickly as possible, guided by the map the Countess had transmitted. "Scott," Pamela said as we slogged through the filthy water, "if this goes wrong—"
"It won't,"
I interrupted.
"If it does," she insisted, "I want you to know something. Whatever Blackthorn created you to be, what you've become is so much more. You've made choices they never programmed, shown humanity they never expected."
"Because of you," I said. "You showed me it was possible to be more than what others make you." She smiled, her face barely visible in the dim emergency lights of the tunnel.
"Perhaps we've taught each other."
We reached the service ladder exactly as planned and climbed to level B5, a maintenance level that ran beneath most of New Avalon's central sector. From there, we moved through service corridors and abandoned tunnels, making our way toward the coordinates the Countess had provided for Blackthorn's primary facility. Precisely 1 hour after our escape, alarms began to sound throughout the central sector. Emergency announcements warned of a containment breach at a research facility several kilometers from our position. "The Countess's diversion," Pamela confirmed. "It's working, Security personnel are being redirected. We reached the outer perimeter of the Blackthorn facility, an unassuming office complex that served as a front for the vast underground operation. With the diversion drawing away many of the guards, we were able to access a service entrance using security codes provided by the Countess. These will get us inside, Pamela explained. But the inner sanctum where the neural interface equipment is located will have independent security. We'll need to improvise. Improvisation is apparently one of my specialties, I said, remembering how easily tactical thinking had come to me during our previous encounters with Blackthorn forces. The facility's outer levels were largely deserted, with most security personnel responding to the Countess's diversion. We moved quickly through sterile corridors that looked more like a high-tech medical center than a vampire stronghold. Blackthorn embraces the aesthetic of the future they want to create, Pamela explained, noting my surprise at the modern surroundings. They've rejected most traditional vampire customs. Including the coffins? I asked with a small smile. Especially the coffins, she confirmed, returning the smile. Much too dramatic for their tastes. We encountered minimal resistance until we reached a heavily secured elevator bank. 2 guard drones stood watch, their synthetic skin barely concealing the mechanical components beneath. We need to take them out silently, I whispered. If they trigger an alarm, we're finished. Pamela nodded. I'll take the one on the left. You take the right. On my mark. We moved in perfect synchronization, closing the distance to the guards before they could react. Pamela's blade sliced through her target's neck with surgical precision, while I drove a specialized dagger, designed to disrupt synthetic neural systems, into the base of my opponent's skull. Both drones collapsed without a sound. Impressive, Pamela noted as we dragged the bodies out of sight. Your combat programming is clearly activating. It doesn't feel like programming, I admitted. It feels natural, like I've always known how to do this. That's how the best programming works, she said, not unkindly. It becomes indistinguishable from instinct. The elevator required biometric authentication. Pamela solved this problem by pressing the severed hand of one of the drones against the scanner. The doors slid open, revealing a glass capsule that would take us deep into the earth. The neural interface lab will be on the lowest level, she said, as we entered the elevator. That's where they'd keep the equipment needed to remove your command codes. The descent seemed to take forever. Each second increased the risk of discovery, of the diversion ending before we accomplished our mission. Finally, the elevator slowed, and the doors opened onto a vast laboratory complex. What we saw froze us both in place. Hundreds of glass tanks lined the walls, each containing a partially formed humanoid figure. Some appeared mostly human, others predominantly vampire, and many were horrific hybrids of flesh and machine. All were connected to a central system through a network of tubes and cables. The replacement program, Pamela whispered. It's further along than we realized. In the center of the laboratory stood a complex apparatus that could only be the neural interface. A chair, surrounded by mechanical arms, tipped with needles and sensors. It looked medieval, despite its advanced technology. An instrument of torture disguised as medical equipment. That's it, I said. That's what we need. Yes, came a voice from behind us. That is indeed what you need. We spun to find ourselves facing a tall, elegant man in a white laboratory coat. His skin had the pallor of a vampire, but his eyes glowed with artificial blue light, and portions of his skull had been replaced with transparent material, revealing the cybernetic components within. Dr. Ashton, Pamela said, recognition and hatred mingling in her voice. Pamela, he replied with a slight bow. How delightful to see you again. And you've brought our prodigal son home. How thoughtful. I raised my weapon, but the doctor merely smiled. I wouldn't recommend violence, Echo 9. This facility is designed to contain beings far more dangerous than you. My name is Scott, I growled. A charming affectation, he said dismissively. But we both know that's merely the designation assigned to your cover identity. Why are you doing this? Pamela demanded. Why replace an entire species? Dr. Ashton gestured expansively at the tanks around us. Evolution, my dear. Vampires have remained static for millennia, while humans have continued to adapt and innovate. We face extinction not through violence, but through obsolescence. The future belongs to those who can control their own development, their own evolution. By becoming machines? I asked in disgust. By becoming perfect, he corrected. Imagine beings with vampire strength and longevity, human adaptability, and machine precision. No hunger, no weakness, no divided loyalties. The perfect synthesis. No free will, Pamela added. No choice, no art, no love. Nothing that makes existence worthwhile. Romantic notions, Ashton said with a dismissive wave. Holdovers from an age of imperfection. As he spoke, I noticed movement behind the rows of tanks, security drones taking up positions, surrounding us. The diversion was ending, or had been discovered as a ruse. You won't succeed, I told him. We'll stop you. Ashton smiled again. You misunderstand, Echo 9. You're not here to stop us. You're here to complete us. He gestured toward the neural interface chair. Your unique integration of vampire and human elements is the key to perfecting our replacement species. Once we extract your neural patterns, we can replicate your stability in all future units. I won't cooperate, I said. Cooperation is unnecessary, he replied. The chair will extract what we need with or without your consent. The security drones began to close in. Pamela and I moved back to back, weapons ready. Any ideas? I asked her quietly. Just one, she replied. But you're not going to like it. Before I could ask what she meant, Pamela launched herself at Dr. Ashton with supernatural speed. The security drones opened fire, but she was already moving, dragging the doctor toward the central control console. Scott, she shouted. The tanks! Destroy the central feed. I understood immediately. The replacement prototypes were all connected to a central nutrient and control system. Following her direction, I fired at the massive distribution hub at the far end of the laboratory. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The partially formed creatures in the tanks began to convulse as their life support failed. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and red emergency lights bathed the laboratory in crimson. System breach detected, announced an automated voice. Emergency protocols engaged. Purge sequence initiated. Dr. Ashton's face contorted with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? Years of research, thousands of specimens all destroyed. That was the idea, Pamela said, holding one of her blades to his throat. Now, you're going to help us deactivate Scott's command codes, or you'll join your precious specimens. The security drones had stopped advancing, awaiting new orders in the chaos. The purge sequence can't be stopped, Ashton said, his artificial calm cracking. This entire facility will be sterilized in 15 minutes. Everything inside will be reduced to component atoms. Then I suggest you work quickly, Pamela replied, pushing him toward the neural interface chair. Under Pamela's watchful eye, Ashton prepared the interface while I took up a defensive position against the immobilized drones. The laboratory continued to deteriorate around us as the purge sequence progressed, with smaller explosions erupting from auxiliary systems. This will be unpleasant, Ashton warned as he adjusted the final settings on the chair. The command codes are integrated throughout your neural structure. Removing them will cause significant pain. Just do it, I said, strapping myself into the chair. The mechanical arms descended, needles finding my skull with unerring precision. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, like fire coursing through my brain, burning away parts of myself I hadn't known existed. Through the agony, I caught glimpses of memories, real memories, not the implanted ones. The sterile lab where I was created, the endless tests and modifications, the failed echo units before me, driven mad by the conflicting impulses of vampire bloodlust and human consciousness. And then, unexpectedly, Pamela, not as I knew her now, but years ago, breaking into the facility, finding me in suspended animation, making the decision to free me rather than destroy me, as she had been ordered to do. "You saved me," I gasped through the pain. "Before, it was you." Pamela's expression confirmed what my recovered memories were telling me. "I couldn't let them use you," she said simply. "Even then, I saw something in you worth saving." Dr. Ashton laughed bitterly. "How touching! The vampire assassin fell for her target." "Silence," Pamela hissed, pressing her blade harder against his throat. 7 minutes to complete sterilization, the automated system announced. "The process is nearly complete," Ashton said. "The command codes are being neutralized." With a final surge of pain, the needles withdrew from my skull. I felt different, lighter somehow, as if chains I hadn't known I was carrying had fallen away. "It's done," Ashton confirmed. "He's free of Blackthorn control." "Good," Pamela said, then slammed the hilt of her blade against his temple, knocking him unconscious. "We need to leave. Now." I staggered from the chair, my legs unsteady. "The elevator!" "We'll be locked down during the purge sequence," she finished. "But there's an emergency evacuation shaft for high-ranking personnel." She pointed to a reinforced door at the far end of the laboratory. That way, we fought through the spreading destruction, dodging falling debris and electrical discharges as the facility began to tear itself apart. The evacuation shaft turned out to be a small pod system, designed to rapidly transport key personnel to the surface. "Only one pod left," Pamela observed as we reached the station. 5 minutes to complete sterilization," the system announced. "Get in," I told her. "I'll find another way out." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "There is no other way out. This is it." "Then you go. This was my fight, not yours." Instead of arguing, Pamela grabbed me by the front of my shirt and pulled me into a fierce kiss. "It became my fight the moment I chose to save you," she said, when we broke apart. "Now get in the damn pod." The evacuation pod was barely large enough for 2 people. We squeezed in together as the countdown continued, the facility disintegrating around us. "Evacuation protocol engaged," announced the system, as the pod sealed itself. "Emergency ascent initiated." We shot upward through the shaft at nearly crushing velocity, the G-forces pressing us together in the confined space. Behind us, the Blackthorn facility collapsed inward, the purge sequence destroying every trace of their replacement program. The pod eventually slowed and came to a stop at a nondescript building in New Avalon's upper levels. We emerged cautiously, expecting resistance, but found only an empty office. "It's over," Pamela said, watching through a window as emergency vehicles converged on the site of the facility's collapse. "Blackthorn's primary research is destroyed. Their replacement program is set back decades, if not permanently." "And the vampire cyborgs?" "Some will survive," she admitted. "But without their central facility and research, they're just another faction, not an existential threat." We made our way carefully through the city, avoiding official checkpoints and surveillance. The Countess had provided coordinates for a safe extraction point where her people would meet us. "What happens now?" I asked as we waited in the shadows of an abandoned loading dock. Pamela considered the question. "The Countess will want to ensure no trace of the replacement program remains. That means tracking down backup data, eliminating key researchers. And me? I'm still a walking blueprint for their hybrid soldiers." She took my hand, her cool fingers entwining with mine. "You're also evidence that free will can't be programmed away, that even a being created as a weapon can choose to be something more." "So I'm a philosophical proof of concept?" I asked with a small smile. "You're whatever you choose to be," she replied. "That's the point." A sleek vehicle pulled up to the loading dock, bearing the Countess's insignia. "Our ride," Pamela confirmed. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can figure out what comes next. She squeezed my hand. Together, if that's what you want. I thought about everything that had happened, discovering I wasn't human, learning I was created as a weapon, finding out the woman I was falling for had saved me long before I knew she existed. Together sounds good, I said. But I have one condition. Pamela raised an eyebrow. Which is? No more coffins, I said with a straight face. They're too dramatic. Her laughter echoed in the empty loading dock, a sound of genuine joy that I suspected few had heard from her in her 5 centuries of existence. I make no promises, she replied, pulling me toward the waiting vehicle. But I'm willing to negotiate. 6 months later, we were living in a converted crypt beneath an abandoned church on the outskirts of New Avalon. Pamela had insisted on some traditional vampire aesthetics, Gothic arches, antique furniture, and yes, a coffin. Though this one was considerably less high-tech than her previous model. It's nostalgic, she'd explained when I questioned the ornate black casket in the center of our living space. Like how humans keep vinyl records or paper books. I'd learned to accept these little vampiric eccentricities, just as she'd learned to tolerate my insistence on keeping actual food in the kitchen alongside her blood supplies. Compromise, we discovered, was possible even between species. The fallout from the Blackthorn incident had been significant. The Countess and her faction had gained considerable influence in vampire society, promoting a return to traditional values while cautiously embracing technological advancements that didn't threaten their fundamental nature. Blackthorn's surviving members had gone underground, their power severely diminished without their replacement program. As for me, I was still adjusting to my hybrid nature. With Pamela's guidance, I'd learned to control my enhanced abilities and manage the vampire aspects of my physiology. I still required both food and blood, existing in a unique space between human and vampire. My memories had stabilized as well. While I couldn't recover everything Blackthorn had erased, I developed a stronger sense of self, not defined by implanted memories or programmed responses, but by choices I'd made since learning the truth. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, actual cooked food, a skill I'd been developing, when Pamela returned from a meeting with the Countess. She moved with her usual silent grace, appearing beside me without warning. "You need to wear a bell," I said, only half joking, as I recovered from the startled jump that had nearly sent a pan of sautéing vegetables flying. "And ruin my fun?" she replied, stealing a piece of bell pepper from the cutting board. She'd developed a strange appreciation for certain human foods, though they provided no nutritional value for her. "The Countess sends her regards." "That's unexpected," I said, turning down the heat under the pan. I was under the impression she merely tolerated my existence. "You've grown on her," Pamela said with a smile. "Like a fungus. But still, progress." I laughed and turned to face her fully. Even after 6 months together, the sight of her still caught me off guard sometimes. Her pale beauty, the ancient wisdom in her eyes contrasted with the youthful playfulness of her smile. A contradiction, just like me. "What did she want?" I asked, returning to my cooking. "Information, mainly. There are rumors of Blackthorn remnants gathering in the outer sectors." Pamela moved to the refrigerator and retrieved a bottle of her synthetic blood. "Nothing serious yet, but worth monitoring. Do you think they'll try to restart the replacement program? Without the research from the primary facility, it would take decades." She poured the crimson liquid into a wine glass, another of her affectations. Still, fanatics rarely give up their dreams easily. I finished preparing our dinner, stir-fried vegetables and synthetic protein for me, a glass of blood for her, and we settled at the small table in what passed for a dining area. These domestic moments still felt surreal sometimes, given the circumstances of our meeting and everything that had followed. "I've been thinking," I said as we ate, "about what I am, what I want to be. Pamela looked up, her expression carefully neutral. And what conclusions have you reached? I'm never going to be fully human again, I said. But I'm not a vampire either. I exist somewhere in between, a hybrid in a world that likes clear categories. Categories are overrated, she said. In 500 years, I've seen countless beings defy classification. The world adjusts. Maybe, I conceded. But I think I need to define myself on my own terms. Not as Echo 9, not as Scott the security technician with implanted memories, but as whatever I choose to be now. And what do you choose? She asked softly. I met her gaze across the table. I choose to use what Blackthorn created for something they never intended. To bridge worlds, human, vampire, maybe even others. To prove that coexistence isn't just possible, but valuable. A slow smile spread across Pamela's face. A noble ambition. I had a good teacher, I replied. Someone who showed me that defying your creators can be the most authentic form of existence. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was still cooler than mine, but the difference had lessened as my physiology continued to evolve. We could leave New Avalon, she suggested. There are other underground cities, other communities where someone with your unique perspective might be valuable. Leave. I hadn't considered the possibility. What about your position here? Your responsibilities to the Countess? I've served Vampire Society for 5 centuries, she said. Perhaps it's time for something new. Her eyes held mine. Unless you'd prefer to stay. I thought about New Avalon, the only home I could remember, though those memories were largely artificial. No, I decided. A fresh start sounds good. Later that night, as Pamela slept in her traditional coffin, and I lay on the more conventional bed we'd added to our living space, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. From a security technician with a mysterious past to a hybrid being caught between worlds. From a man who feared vampires to one who loved one. I heard the soft creak of the coffin lid opening and turned to see Pamela emerging. Her movements liquid and graceful, even in the near-total darkness. Can't sleep? I asked as she approached my bed. Too much on my mind, she admitted, sitting on the edge of the mattress. This talk of leaving has stirred up memories. I haven't started fresh in a very long time. Having second thoughts? She shook her head. No, just acknowledging the significance. Her hand found mine in the darkness. New beginnings are rare in a life as long as mine. I tugged gently on her hand, inviting her to lie beside me. She hesitated, another of her vampire peculiarities, this reluctance to share sleeping space, but then relented, stretching out next to me on the bed. You know, I said as she settled against me, when I agreed to that midnight date, I never imagined I'd end up here. In a former crypt with a vampire? She asked, amusement in her voice. In a life that feels more real than the one I thought was genuine. I turned to face her in the darkness. Ironic, isn't it? Everything I believed about myself was a lie, yet I've never felt more authentic than I do now. That's the paradox of existence, she murmured. Sometimes we must lose ourselves to find ourselves. Very philosophical for someone who claims to be a pragmatist, I teased. 5 centuries gives one time to dabble in various intellectual pursuits, she replied, with mock haughtiness. I went through an existentialist phase in the 1890s. Quite tedious, really. I laughed quietly, marveling at the casual way she referenced historical periods she'd lived through. Any other philosophical phases I should know about? Nihilism during the Black Death. Understandable, given the circumstances. A brief flirtation with Epicureanism during the Renaissance. Oh, and a positively embarrassing period of romanticism in the early 1800s. She made a face. The poetry I wrote then should be burned if ever discovered. Now that I'd like to see, I said, grinning. She poked me in the ribs with inhuman precision. Never happening. Some secrets should remain buried for eternity. We fell silent for a while, comfortable in each other's presence. Outside, the artificial night of New Avalon hummed with distant machinery and the occasional transport vehicle passing above our subterranean home. "I was in my coffin thinking," Pamela said eventually, "about something you said earlier, about bridging worlds." "What about it?" "It reminded me of why I saved you. That first time in the Blackthorn facility." Her voice grew softer, more introspective. "I'd been sent to destroy the entire Echo project, all the prototypes, all the research. But when I found you, something was different." "Different how?" I prompted when she paused. "You were in stasis, but your brainwave patterns were unique, unlike the other Echo units, where they showed chaos or flatlined obedience. Yours were harmonious, vampire and human aspects in balance, neither dominating the other." Her fingers traced patterns on my arm as she spoke. "I'd never seen anything like it, in 5 centuries of existence. It seemed valuable, worth preserving." "So you made a unilateral decision to save me instead of destroying me," I said. "I've never been particularly good at following orders," she admitted. "The Countess was displeased, to put it mildly." "Yet here we are." "Here we are," she echoed, proving my instinct correct, I might add. I pulled her closer, savoring the rare moment of vulnerability from someone who had spent centuries maintaining careful distance from others. "Thank you," I said simply, "for seeing something worth saving." "Thank you for becoming something worth knowing," she replied. 2 days later, we began preparations to leave New Avalon. The Countess had provided documentation and transport arrangements to one of the newer underground cities, New Carthage, built beneath the ruins of what had once been a major metropolitan area before the solar flares. "It's less established than New Avalon," Pamela explained, as we packed our essential belongings. "The vampire presence there is minimal, the power structure's still forming. A good place to introduce new ideas." "A good place to disappear, too," I observed. "That as well," she agreed. "Blackthorn may be diminished, but not destroyed. Anonymity remains our best defense." My arsenal of weapons had grown considerably since our first encounter, as had my proficiency with them. Whatever else Blackthorn had done, they'd created me to be an effective combatant. I'd chosen to embrace that aspect of myself, not as a weapon, but as a protector. Pamela watched as I methodically packed various specialized blades and modified firearms. "Planning for trouble?" she asked. "Hoping for peace, preparing for war," I replied. Another military maxim that stuck. "Some of your programming has its uses," she conceded. I paused in my packing. "Does it bother you, being with someone who was literally created by your enemies?" She considered the question seriously, as she did most things. "At first, perhaps, I questioned my own judgment, my motivations." A smile touched her lips. "But you've proven to be more than your origins, time and again. You've made choices Blackthorn never anticipated, developed in ways they couldn't have programmed. Nature versus nurture, with a twist," I said. "Precisely. They may have designed your body and initial programming, but you've written your own story since then." She approached and ran a hand along my jaw. "And that story has become rather important to me. The night before our departure, the Countess herself came to our crypt to bid farewell. It was only the second time I'd met her in person, the first being after the Blackthorn facility destruction, and her presence was as intimidating as I remembered. She carried the weight of centuries with graceful authority, her eyes holding the cold calculation of someone who had survived countless threats and betrayals. "Pamela," she greeted with a slight inclination of her head. "Echo 9. "Scott," I corrected gently. The Countess's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Indeed. Old habits. Pamela offered our distinguished guest a glass of rare vintage blood. The real thing, not synthetic, reserved for special occasions. This is unexpected, Countess. We were planning to pay our respects to you before leaving. I preferred a more private setting for this conversation, the Countess replied, accepting the glass but not drinking immediately. Her gaze moved around our living space, taking in the blend of vampire tradition and modern technology. An interesting domicile. It suits you both. Thank you, I said, unsure if it was actually a compliment. The Countess finally turned her full attention to me, her ancient eyes seeming to peer directly into my hybrid soul. I have lived for nearly a millennium, she said without preamble. In that time, I have seen countless threats to vampire kind rise and fall. Blackthorn was merely the latest in a long line of misguided visionaries. Yet you opposed them when many others would not, I noted. Because they threatened a balance I have long worked to maintain. She sipped her blood with the appreciation of a connoisseur. Humans and vampires exist in a complex relationship, predator and prey. Yes, but also symbiotic partners in many ways. Blackthorn would have destroyed that balance forever. And me? I asked. Where do I fit in this balance? That, she said, is precisely why I've come. You, Scott, represent something unprecedented, a true bridge between species, created for destruction but choosing connection instead. Her expression softened fractionally. New Carthage will offer you opportunities that New Avalon cannot. There are others there, hybrids of different kinds, beings who exist between established categories. A community of misfits? Pamela suggested. A nexus of potential, the Countess corrected. The solar flares changed more than just human civilization. They accelerated mutations, created environmental niches for new forms of life. The future belongs not to the pure, but to the adaptive. I exchanged a glance with Pamela. This was more than a farewell visit. The Countess was revealing a larger design. You're sending us there with a purpose, I said. It wasn't a question. I am suggesting a possibility, she replied carefully. New Carthage needs stability, leadership from those who understand both human and non-human perspectives. You two are uniquely qualified. You want us to establish vampire-human relations there, Pamela said, understanding dawning in her eyes. To create the framework for coexistence. I want you to create something new, the Countess corrected. Not bound by old treaties or ancient grudges. A community where capability matters more than origin. Why us? I asked. Surely you have more experienced diplomats, leaders with established credentials. The Countess fixed me with her penetrating gaze. Because you have nothing to preserve, Scott. No ancient power base to protect. No traditional values to uphold. You exist outside our hierarchies while understanding them. And Pamela, she turned to my partner. You have always seen further than most of our kind. Recognized potential where others saw only threat. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd ever heard the Countess offer. Pamela inclined her head in acknowledgement, clearly understanding the significance of the moment. We will consider your suggestion carefully, Countess, she said formally. See that you do. The ancient vampire rose, setting down her barely touched glass of blood. The transport I've arranged will accommodate your coffin. By the way, I assumed you would want to take it. A small smile played at Pamela's lips. Thank you for your consideration. After the Countess had departed, we sat in thoughtful silence for several minutes, absorbing the implications of her visit. Well, I said finally, that was unexpected. Not entirely, Pamela admitted. The Countess rarely does anything without multiple purposes. I suspected she had reasons beyond goodwill for facilitating our relocation. Do you want to do it? Become vampire-human ambassadors or whatever she's suggesting? Pamela tilted her head, considering. I've spent centuries operating from the shadows. Scott, the idea of building something openly, creating new structures rather than undermining old ones, it has a certain appeal. And you think we could do it? Create this new framework for coexistence? I think, she said slowly, that if anyone can, it would be us. A 500-year-old vampire rebel and a hybrid super soldier with an identity crisis. Her lips curved into a smile. It sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. Or a good story, I countered. Perhaps both. She moved to stand beside me, her hand finding mine with practiced ease. What do you think? Ready to become a revolutionary leader after just discovering who you are? I laughed softly. When you put it that way, it sounds insane. The best plans usually do, she replied. That's how you know they're worth attempting. I considered all that had happened since that first midnight date. Discovering my hybrid nature, fighting Blackthorn, destroying their facility, and finding a place beside this extraordinary vampire who had saved me twice over. Perhaps the Countess was right. Perhaps our unique perspectives made us ideal architects for something new. Well, I said, squeezing Pamela's hand. I did say I wanted to bridge worlds. This would certainly qualify. Indeed it would, she agreed, though I suspect it won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, I said, echoing what was apparently an age-old truth. But at least we'll be facing it together. Pamela smiled, her ancient eyes warm with an emotion I'd never expected to find in a vampire's gaze. Together, she agreed, though I'm still keeping the coffin. I wouldn't have it any other way, I replied. The next evening, we departed New Avalon aboard the Countess's private transport, a sleek vehicle designed for the underground transit systems that connected the subterranean cities. As promised, there was ample space for Pamela's coffin, which had been carefully loaded and secured. As the transport accelerated into the main tunnel, I watched the lights of New Avalon recede behind us. The city, where I'd been planted by Blackthorn, where I'd lived a life constructed from implanted memories, where I'd discovered the truth about myself, all fading into the distance. Having second thoughts? Pamela asked, noting my contemplative expression. No, I said truthfully, just acknowledging an ending before embracing a beginning. Poetic, she observed with a small smile. You've come a long way from the security technician who was terrified to discover he was on a date with a vampire. And you've come a long way from the vampire who was using me for reconnaissance, I countered. Touché. She settled beside me as the transport reached cruising speed. Though I maintain I had multiple motivations even then. Of course you did, I agreed indulgently. The journey to New Carthage would take nearly 24 hours through the complex network of underground tunnels. We had time to rest, to plan, to prepare for whatever awaited us in the newer settlement. As the rhythmic sound of the transport lulled us into comfortable silence, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. I had been created as a weapon, a tool for genocide, designed to help destroy both vampire kind and humanity as we knew it. Instead, I had become something unexpected, a bridge between worlds, a proof that connection was possible where division had been intended. Pamela leaned her head against my shoulder, an uncharacteristically vulnerable gesture from someone who had maintained careful distance from others for centuries. What are you thinking? She asked softly. That Blackthorn failed in every possible way, I replied. They created me to divide and destroy. But here I am, choosing to unite and build. She smiled against my shoulder. The ultimate rebellion, becoming the opposite of what your creators intended. I learned from the best, I said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Outside our transport, the underground world rushed by in darkness, illuminated only occasionally by maintenance lights or the distant glow of smaller settlements. We were traveling into an unknown future, carrying with us the potential for something new, a community where differences were strengths rather than divisions, where being hybrid meant being whole rather than incomplete. You know, Pamela said after a while, when I first found your profile in the Blackthorn database and decided to meet you, I never imagined we'd end up here. Stuck in your coffin? I teased. She laughed, the sound still rare enough to be precious. In a manner of speaking, though this particular journey seems considerably more promising than a traditional coffin stay. I'd say so, I agreed. At least we're moving forward, not just lying around dead. Always looking on the bright side, she observed with mock severity. How terribly human of you. And your dark humor is very vampire, I countered. See? We complement each other perfectly. Her expression softened into something genuine. Perhaps we do. As New Carthage drew closer with each passing hour, I found myself filled with an unexpected sense of purpose. The hybrid created to destroy had found a reason to build. The vampire who had rebelled against her own kind had found a cause worthy of her centuries of experience. Together, we would create something neither of us could have imagined on that first midnight date. A future where differences strengthened rather than divided, where being caught between worlds meant building bridges rather than burning them. And if we happened to keep a traditional vampire coffin in our living room while doing so, well, some habits were worth preserving, even in a new world of endless possibilities.